And next up we have Chaos Rising, The Realms, book number 6, an epic LitRPG series written by C.M. Carney. It is 464 pages, $5.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. War is coming to the realms, and only Gryph and the power of his Godhead can prevent the apocalypse. With his loyal NPC Lex at his side, Gryph races to rescue a spy with information critical to the survival of his people. A spy who happens to be Gryph's younger sister. But when an unknown foe rips Gryph from the realms, Lex must lead a ragtag bunch of companions to find the one man who can get Gryph back. Their quest has hardly begun when Lex discovers the princes of chaos have turned their malevolent eyes on the mortal realms, and where their gaze falls, destruction follows. Can Lex and his allies prevent an extra-dimensional invasion in time to save Gryph? Or will chaos rise? Okay, this is a Lex story, and there are some people who do not like Lex. They do not like the fact that the story, whenever the story takes parts from the main character Gryph, and this is one of those stories. However, for me, unlike the independent Lex story that happened earlier in the series, which I still thought was really fun and interesting, this one still has the other members of the cast. So even though Gryph is not in this story for very long, Lex is the main character, and it's the other members of the cast, though, if you've read the series, should be really familiar. So this still feels very much like a Realm story. It's not an independent thing that's like a side story. It's a main series story. It has some very main series consequences to it. So just be aware that there are some reviews who are like, oh, I can't believe this is another Lex story. I'm like, it is, but it's not necessarily just about Lex. It's still the main series. Calm down. Not that you're not entitled to your opinion. You are. We all are. But if Lex bothers you, don't read it. That's perfectly cool. Just be aware. It's just actually talked about in the novel description. Okay. I like the story. I really do. Actually, I like this story, I think, a lot more than some of the other ones that have happened recently in the series. And I think part of that is because the story is in part scaled down initially. It goes to a different location. So you actually get an entirely new environment to explore and play around with. And there was some really good story twists here. And I genuinely like that. There's some nice plot twists, like, oh, that's good for you, man. It's like, that's cool. There, however, is minimal RPG regression. And there are a couple reasons for that. Some of which I can't probably describe in detail, because I recently talked to the author and he told me some of the things he has planned for the series. I'm like, oh, okay, so that makes sense why there's not a lot of RPG regression here, because he has plans where he doesn't want to invest in that yet. So I'm not going to say more, but I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And another part of that is that the story takes place in a different location where those those game mechanics stuff don't necessarily mesh with the rules of that place. And again, I'm trying not to spoil things. So there are a couple reasons for that. But still, it was something I thought was a little bit lacking in this particular story. Still beyond that, and a couple key places where like you could tell there were a little wand waviness for the plot. I really had a great time with it. I really did. Like the characters were fun. It was nice to see Lex come forward again, because he's kind of a fun character for me. I really enjoyed his particular side story. It was one of the funniest ones in the series for me. And I've liked the character Lex quite a bit. So it's nice to see him come forward in this novel and take on a more prominent role. Because when Gryph is around, he really is a secondary character. I mean, he's not the main character, obviously, but I think he's a strong enough character that he carries the story really well. And it was interesting to see a different point of view and to get like the slapstick comedy and also that quirky personality that Lex has, and see it deal with these problems and consequences and actions and leading a group. It was, I enjoyed it quite a bit. So there we go. I had a good time with it. I was surprised when I read the actual page count. I was like, really, it's almost 500 pages. It felt like it was a lot less. I felt like it was 250 pages because it was so entertaining. It kind of zipped by for me, which is always a good quality, in my opinion. When a story just kind of goes because you're just so into it so much, that's always a good marker for me. So I kind of found myself just going along for this chaotic ride. Action. And this story really does wrap up a thread introduced in the last book. and introduces a new thread, which I think people are going to find interesting from what the author tells me, what he plans to do in the future. So I think it'll be fun. For me, gets score 7.7 out of 10. That's Chaos Rising: The Realms, book number 6, with the score of 7.7 out of 10.